Welcome to another segment in our travels across North Queensland as we make our way to Croydon. Our visit to this remote part of North Queensland continues to captivate and interest both Rick and I. We had lived in the Gulf region north of Georgetown well over 40 years ago, but had never ventured to this side of the Gulf, as we always made our way to Cairns when we had time off. It has been fascinating discovering more of the region we had heard so much about. The country is similar but different in many ways, so we're looking forward to seeing what the area had to offer. Today's leg of our travels would be through around 200 kilometres of Gulf country. We left Karumba early and made our way back through Normanton, travelling over country we had seen a couple of times already, but still found it incredible. The Karumba Plains were awe-inspiring, as was Walker's Bend and Mutton Hole wetlands. The Norman River, with a catchment area covering over 50,000 square kilometres, influenced by diurnal tides, but by all accounts is a great fishing spot, is impressive. At the time of editing this episode, Normanton had experienced quite significant flooding, and by some of the photos or posts from people, the river had caused flooding, with the corduroy crossing having been inundated. However, the waters have receded, leaving the road a bit damaged, but not bad considering the sheer amount of water that was over it earlier in the month. We stopped in Normanton opposite the Purple Pub for a last look around town and a short morning walk before continuing on our journey. Oh, the stories that have come out of that pub over the years! If only someone had taken the time to write them down. They would be worth a fortune. Rick and I had really enjoyed our stay in Karumba and the time spent exploring the Normanton area. We will be back one day to see more of what is on offer. About 10 kilometres south of Normanton we turn onto the Gulf Development Road, a sealed all-weather road, though it features some single-lane sections and is part of the Savannah Way, that stretches approximately 150 kilometres between the two towns. I was looking forward to this leg of our journey, but I'm not really sure why. The country just seemed to be one place that I wanted to know more about, so really had no idea what to expect. On occasion we could see the railway line for the Gulflander as it ran beside the road. We crossed another bridge over the Norman River that was quite impressive, and I wonder how it fared during the flooding that has occurred in the area lately. The Norman River rises in the Gregory Range, part of the Great Dividing Range, 200 kilometres southeast of Croydon, flowing in a northwesterly direction through Normanton before entering the Gulf of Carpentaria near Karumba. We crossed the boundary between the Carpentaria and Croydon Shires. Here in the Gulf, the shires are large land masses with very few people, with Croydon Shire covering an area of approximately 29,500 square kilometres, with around 250 residents, most living in the town of Croydon, with its economy driven by pastoral industries, service and tourism, while the Carpentaria covers just over 64,000 square kilometres, with approximately 2,000 residents, primarily in the towns of Karumba and Normanton, with the area heavily involved in fishing, mining and grazing. The Gulf Development Road passes through the locality of Blackbull from the southwest to the southeast, with the Normanton-Croydon railway line running parallel to it. The Cannon River, a tributary of the Norman River, passes through the locality, though in the dry is just a string of waterholes. We had been taking things slowly and enjoying the country. About 95 kilometres from Normanton we stopped in at Blackbull railway siding, established in 1891, and now features a rusted water tank from the former steam trains and a turning triangle, along with a refreshment building. Originally constructed to support the local mining and agricultural sectors, it now serves as a key refreshment stop for the rail motor, the Gulflander. The railway siding was originally called Patterson Siding, but was renamed in 1891, reportedly after a black bull found during mustering by William and Joseph Taffy. There is also a memorial dedicated to Queensland Police Sub-Inspector who was killed while on duty in the area. Just a small reminder of the sacrifice made by a member of the police force, especially in those unsettled times in the 1880s. Rick and I wandered the siding, enjoying listening to the bellowing cattle in the yards across the road at Mayvale. Before long, it was time to make tracks. On arriving in Croydon, we stopped in at the Information Centre for our permit to camp at Racecourse Rest, the donation camp near the rodeo grounds, where we proceeded to and made camp. Once we had Gidget set up, we made our way back into town and out to Lake Belmore, a lake in the middle of the Gulf country, something I had never imagined. Waterholes? Yes, but a lake? What a surprise Croydon was. I'm not sure what I had expected, but it was impressive, and not just the lake. Lake Belmore has provided Croydon with a resource more precious than the gold once mined throughout the area: water. Situated less than 4 kilometres from town on a fully sealed bitumen road, the earth dam was constructed in 1995 as the town's primary water supply. Prior to 1996, Croydon mainly obtained its water from a number of bores from mining pits such as the Golden Butterfly, which with time were becoming dry. Lake Belmore really is an aquatic jewel of the Gulf Savannah, being the largest body of fresh water in the region. The lake is stocked with red claw, barramundi and sooty grunters, with black brim occurring naturally. But we weren't there to fish, but to enjoy the peace and tranquillity the lake offered. On our way back to Croydon, we stopped at Dyham's Lookout, with views of the vast outback stretching in all directions. Such an awe-inspiring view, with Croydon nestled in the middle. I could well imagine what a stunning sunset or sunrise would look like from up here. Certainly very different from over the Gulf of Carpentaria at Karumba, but just as breathtaking. It is hard to imagine Croydon being the third largest town in North Queensland, though the well-preserved heritage buildings and attractions certainly can attest to it. Once the heart of the gold rush in the late 1800s, the town saw miners flocked in search of fortune, unearthing over 23,675 kilograms of gold. Where miners flocked to, the Chinese often followed. Further down the hill from the lookout was the Chinese Temple archaeological site, a heritage-listed archaeological site of exceptional rarity and significance in Queensland, on the outskirts north of Croydon. From what little I remember of Australian history, I knew that there were Chinese settlers drawn to goldfields throughout the country, and had visited the graves and burning towers at Beechworth Cemetery. But it seems Croydon at one time had the largest Chinese population in Australia outside Sydney. The Chinese came to wherever the gold diggings were, but here prejudice prevented them from mining, so they turned their efforts to a much better way of earning a living, supplying the miners with fresh produce. Their market gardens thrived. Rick and I took our time as we strolled around the heritage loop that reveals the remains of the original temple foundation, house footings and artefact scatters, including what is believed to be the second largest pig roasting oven in the southern hemisphere, a rare piece of Chinese settlement activity in regional Queensland. Signage across the site tells the stories of everyday life in the once bustling Chinese quarter. Some might think it is just scattered rubbish, but when put into context it reveals not only a different time, but also a different culture and way of life. 2 imposing Fudog statues flank the entrance, believed to ward off evil and protect sacred spaces. The lotus-inspired shade structures and a ceremonial incense vessel that stands at the heart of the entrance are a remarkable reminder of the rich history of the Gulf region and the role that the Chinese played in the development of the state. After we had enjoyed the Chinese site, we made our way back to town, stopping at the caravan park to read about the Lady Mary mine, one of the 110 mines on the Croydon goldfields, but unfortunately the information panel was difficult to read. We stopped beside Federation Park, shaded by huge trees and shade sails. Set amongst the trees were intriguing steel sculptures reflecting Croydon's diverse history, its indigenous culture, Chinese settlers, pastoral heritage, and gold mining past, as well as an open book memorial honouring the sacrifice of those who served in the World Wars, Korean and Vietnam Wars. It was such a cool, serene spot that gave us the opportunity to think about all that has made Croydon such an interesting place. We then walked across the road to Croydon's Heritage Precinct, where we wandered through 4 heritage buildings: the police station circa 1896 and jail, the police sergeant's residence circa 1898, the courthouse circa 1887, which is the oldest civic building in Croydon, where we got to listen to a court case from 1902, with the last court held in 1926, and the town hall circa 1890. We wandered through the back rooms of the courthouse that once housed the former Goldfields Administration Office. Directly behind the courthouse was the police station with the jail, full of photographic displays and museum artefacts that tell the story of Croydon in those early years. In the town hall, early film equipment, which is still in use today, filled the admissions room. I did a few swirls around the dance floor, remembering my early teenage years when dances were all the go. If ever someone asked me about which museum I have enjoyed, and I must admit we have visited a large number during our travels, I would have to say the Heritage Precinct here in Croydon would be on a par with the Goolgong Pioneers Museum, though I think the one here in Croydon has been more selective and judicious with the artefacts they have on display. It has been one of the most jam-packed, informative and realistic displays, though discerning in the number of artefacts exhibited, that I have encountered. The huge number of informative displays, and I only read a small number of them, as there were so many. A lot of effort has gone into preserving these lovely buildings and presenting them in a delightful, realistic way. The Heritage Precinct on the Gulf Development Road was chock-a-block full, and I do mean chock-a-block full of interesting displays. Rick and I thought the precinct was finished, but as we made our way back towards Brown Street through Reese Park, we passed the CWA building and then came to the old butcher shop replica across the road from the Club Hotel built in 1887 that has retained its historic flavour in old-style rooms, atmosphere and the rough and tumble ways of an outback town. During the gold rush the streets were lit by kerosene lamps, with 4 originals forged in Croydon, and replicas of these lights lined the sandstone curbed streets around the Heritage Precinct. We made our way to the Croydon Centre supermarket and cafe on the site of the old Masonic Hall, where we enjoyed an ice cream. The old original hospital male ward, built in 1887, has been relocated and restored for use as a community centre and SES building. The Croydon Shire certainly promotes its history through the restoration and conservation of historical sites. Some we did not get to see, like the Iguana Consul Mining Museum, old tabletop school building, and the heritage-listed Croydon Cemetery, which has operated since 1885, with old graves that reveal the severe hardship of life on outback goldfields. What a day we had had, and we were still not finished with Croydon. The next day we made our way to the Information Centre, where we found more information panels filled with history of the Shire. Women are sometimes forgotten in rural Queensland, for their contribution to life in these remote areas. Here in Croydon, their women are honoured at the Information Centre with displays. Dorothy Coleman, born in Croydon in 1889 in a corrugated iron cottage shaded by gum trees, was Brisbane's leading social photographer. Having studied printing in Brisbane, she then worked in photographic studios, becoming an expert retoucher before opening her own studio in 1935, becoming a famous portrait photographer. The first female flying doctor, Dr. Jean White, was appointed in 1937 and based at the Croydon and Normanton hospitals, serving the Gulf country. Lenora Gregory took over the Croydon Mining News in 1930 when she was only 20 years old, renaming the paper the Gulf News, and enthusiastically produced the first edition in May that year. She was everything: the editor, lead writer, advertising manager, composer, printer and publisher, running the paper until she left Croydon in 1932. Rick and I had stayed in Croydon an extra day to view the arrival of the Gulflander, a rail journey like no other. Originally built to connect the once bustling river port of Normanton to the goldfields of Croydon. From wetlands and grasslands to the arid savannah, the 1950 rail motor, also known as the Tin Hare, ventures through countryside that most people would never see. Affectionately known as the train that goes from nowhere to nowhere. Remaining completely isolated from the Queensland rail network, it is the only line in the state still measured in miles, a living piece of rail history. I was surprised by the number of passengers that were on the train, but then again, it is an iconic rail trip. Croydon certainly has a lot to offer, and I am glad we spent the extra time here, though really could have stayed longer, as I think we have only just touched the surface of what it has to offer. Rick and I stayed and watched the passengers disembark before returning to Gidget, where Rick and I checked out the rodeo arena. Oh, how I remember dragging a pram around Saxby, Sedan Dip, Normanton and Birkenwills camp drafts when the boys were little. I was sure glad when they were able to walk for themselves. So much has improved from those early days, not just the infrastructure of the arena, food outlets and seating areas, but also the prams. We will leave you here as we sit beside Gidget and watch the sun sink below the horizon. I hope you have enjoyed this segment. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we continue across the Gulf to Georgetown. Cheers for now. Live life to the full. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, Live in Life.